Hey, what's up, folks? Got another video for you today. This time it's FreeNAS, specifically FreeNAS 10 Corral, which is the world's most popular storage operating system reimagined. I probably said that right. Anyways, it's the hyper-converged platform of they both have the storage platform, FreeNAS, which I'm a huge fan of, longtime user. We use it here for business production. We've had it deployed at clients. It's built on the BSD and ZFS, which is amazing. Go read about it. Go learn about it. The FreeNAS 10, specifically Coral, is a way better interface for sure. It's real pretty. We're going to get that in a second. The other ability is virtualization and Docker integration into this using the Beehive BSD hypervisor. So it's really slick. You've got Docker images, you've got storage, and you've got it all in one place. So you can build your amazing storage array with redundancy, and then on top of that, virtualize all of your virtual servers on there. Now, it's pretty neat. We're going to dig into a little bit here. We'll start with how you install it, which is really pretty straightforward. FreeNAS installer, I'm running this in a virtual box for the screen recording part, but for virtualization reasons, and to show you how some of that works, I have a hardware machine we'll jump over to after we get this set up and start just running through some of the base features of it and how to get started with it and start playing. Install or upgrade, it does have an upgrade option. We don't care about that as we're not upgrading. This is a clean install. Now, I put 5 80 gig hard drives in here and one 16 gig for boot, because generally speaking, when you install FreeNAS, you're going to want to install it on a thumb drive. Why waste precious hard drive space? It really doesn't take much to run. So I chose a 16 gig, but you can set this up with a larger one. I'm going to set the root password now. I do recommend a longer password, but not for demo purposes anyways. So you set this up and you want to install it on a thumb drive. And the advantage of that is you're not wasting any hard drive space, and it does have the option to build like a redundant thumb drive on there. So for redundancy, you can have 2 thumb drives in there. Thumb drives are inexpensive. You can pick up a couple 32 gig. You can pick up, I generally recommend the better ones. We use the SanDisk. I think they have an industrial one. And anyways, you can find these. You can find some higher quality ones. You're not talking about that much money. That way, it boots off of that. Once everything's booted, it runs, it pushes it into memory, and just saves changes you make to the OS system to the thumb drive. It's not constantly reading, writing to it, so it's not just going to wear out your thumb drive like a lot of people have a concern. And then you can focus on all the big drives that you want to put in here to create all the redundancy and RAID, and we're going to cover that. That's why I have 5 drives in here. So I'm going to let this installer run through and fast forward a bit because it does take a few minutes even on my machine. Alright, it's installed. The FreeNAS installation on 80A0 succeeded in 850 seconds. I like that it times how long it took to install. And we're going to do a shutdown so we can disconnect from the bootable CD and just tell it to boot right from the 80A0. Alright, so it's ready to boot, and we're just going to let it go ahead and do a default boot so I can show you what the console will look like. All right, now once the system's booted, you are in the CLI on the terminal. Now, the CLI is really powerful. I'm going to do I'll talk about it a little bit later as we get through some of the commands. You can administer users, you can create the volumes, you can manage the VMs, the Docker, a lot of different features from it. It's really interesting how they did this, because this isn't a shell prompt. You can get to a shell prompt by just typing shell, and then you get to a shell prompt. This actually lets you control the functions in the machine itself. And that includes setting user passwords, and I'm glad they added this into the wiki of the command needed in case you want to reset this. When I was doing some testing, I tested this and I wanted to reset to factory defaults. Then you have to figure out how to reset the password from the command line here, which is not as intuitive as I thought, but it's one of the first questions they have answered in the FreeNAS wiki, which I'll link to in the description below. So you've seen the IP address on there. It does tell you that. So when you first log in, so we go ahead and log into it, it's 3.24. All right, so FreeNAS is installed, we're logged in. Now we can have some fun. So I already went ahead and added myself as an account here, but adding accounts is pretty easy. Go to accounts, users, and just enter the username. I already did this one for me. You can put in SSH keys in there. Now, this will attach to Active Directory through authentication. It's got a few other services as well. So you can tie this into Windows domain. For the purposes of getting started here, we're just going to do a local account and use the local account storage. Now, speaking of storage, we have to add storage on here. Now, I went ahead and added a handful of disks to this. They're all virtual, so they're not real. They're all on my virtual drive here. So it's not really a RAID array, it's just a bunch of disks for demonstration purposes. I like the way it works here though, because you can just have this pool of disks, grab them, and choose the different types. You want capacity, redundancy, performance. So it helps you with some of the planning. So I want a media drive where I have very little parity, a lot of usable. Virtualization, where we've got 2 separate mirrored sets, which will keep it really solid. Backups, same thing, lots of parity, somewhat usable. Or just optimal in here. Now, you can manually select these, and let's go ahead and delete these out and show you how this works. So you can go here, select data, and now it's just extending each of them. But if we want them together, we can drag the disks right on top. And it starts making some assumptions, and we'll just go ahead and leave this at select a profile so it doesn't force any. So we have enough drives to do a RAID Z2 or a RAID Z1. And with this many drives, we can go all the way up to RAID Z3, but it would create a lot of parity. Now, some of the other options, and I do love this drag and drop. This whole interface is just beautiful with FreeNAS. So we can also leave one of them as a spare and leave this here. Now, what that would do is make it very quick to swap a drive out for when one goes bad. You can just push one into push one from the command line in here. And I say from the command line. Unfortunately, at this iteration of FreeNAS released here in, what is this, March 19th, they don't have the ability to swap these around in the GUI. So if a drive goes bad, you have to go drop down to the command line and use the ZFS commands to replace it. Actually, there's a couple commands. I believe you can do it from the console now. But that's kind of annoying that, it's a RAID array system and it doesn't have it yet. I know they're working on it. I shouldn't, it's an open source product. We're not going to push too hard for that. But it is a minor thing that I will mention. Yes, if you lose a drive, you're going to have to get the command line out to replace one of the drives. Keeping one in a spare position is really handy, but not absolutely necessary, because you can, even when one fails, put it in a drive on the spare. Now, a couple of the other things you may have noticed here, we have a cache option and we have a log option. In the world of ZFS, these options are for building drives out for caching and for delayed write transactions. A little bit different. Cache will store frequently accessed things on, let's say, if we had solid state drives, they'd show up here, but none of these are actually solid state. So you may want to throw one in there for a caching drive. So it says, hey, keep a copy of all the frequently accessed information, because the limitation often is on a gigabit network, the speed of the drives, not the speed of the network. So SSDs kind of overcome that and give you a lot more speed. Now, if you do the log type drive, you actually want to configure these in a mirror. And the reason why is if any of these go bad, you want to be able to not lose data, because what the log does in ZFS is allow you to delay writes. So that fills up here and then siphons it off back to the drives up here. But when it's doing that, if this drive were to have a failure, all that data that's not written yet would go away. So if you do this, be aware of that risk, or be aware and have a mirror so you don't have to worry about it. So, and SSDs are cheap. So if you throw in a couple 250 gig SSDs and then a very large pool over here, as long as the data doesn't exceed the 250 gigs, it should be able to work. That's my understanding as I've read about how the log drives work in here. I'm not actually setting them up. Most of the systems that we've done with them, we just set up a large RAID array of drives in there, 5-6 drives, depending on the configuration. So we'll go ahead and choose this, and we'll RAID Z2 seems reasonable. Now, normally I always encrypt my drives. I have found some major issues here with encrypting them in FreeNAS 10. Works. You can unlock them. You can do encrypted key, or you can do encrypted password. The problems I've run into are if one of the drives goes out, it does not want to re-add them. It wants you to offline that drive. Well, if the drive fails catastrophically, that's fine in a RAID array, but you're unable to offline it. There are forums just all over the place in FreeNAS where people are having this problem and trying to sort it out. It's not clear. It looks like there's ways you could just detach all the individual volumes and then re-import all the volumes and then use the password to unlock it. That kind of needs to be addressed, I think, because the amount of effort, I spent some time playing with it and trying some of the solutions by failing a drive, and it was just very, very difficult. For the purposes of the demonstration, I'm not going to fail a drive and show you how to replace. I'm going to do that in a separate video. It's not too hard to do from the command line, but once you have an encrypted volume, it seems to be really difficult to do. So yeah, definitely something that I'm really hoping with the next iteration. I'm not running the nightly builds, I'm running the release version, but not being able to encrypt the drives kind of bothers me because whenever a drive goes bad on our current FreeNAS system, I don't worry about it. I pull it out of the pool, we go ahead and send it back for, drives usually have a longer warranty. I don't want to have to worry about the date on there, so I pre-encrypt them. Well, with this, if a drive goes bad, it doesn't seem to want to unlock it in any easy fashion, even from the command line. It's a lot of steps to go through to fix one of the drives if one goes catastrophically bad in there. So before I turn this to my production system, I'm going to wait till that specific issue is fixed. So I'm going to give it a name. We'll call it 5 Drive RAID. Real creative name. I like some capitalization here. So this is the 5 Drive RAID system here we created. It's a RAID Z2. And we're going to go and hit save. Now all the tasks show up on the side over here, and you can do other things while the tasks are completing. So this is going to run. Let's jump over the dashboard while that's running. We're going to edit the dashboard, and let's throw on like the ARC demand, CPU usage. CPU temperatures are not going to be relevant for this because it's a virtual machine, load average, memory allocation, network traffic. Now you can add network traffic multiple times. That way you can set it up for each individual network card. We only have one network card, so we're just going to put the one. And we notice over here this finished and it's green. So now we can go over to storage. 5 drives RAID. Shows this all good. It's green. It turns different colors. It'll turn yellow and let you know if it's created. Now we can create different data sets on here. For each data set, you can create a different snapshots. That's all located right in here. You can replicate this to appear. Plenty of options in here. So let's talk about shares. So I already turned on in the services, sharing, SMB. So I clicked and just enabled this, left everything at default. You can rename it, call it whatever name you want, but SMB, of course, is server message block, and this is the Windows sharing. It does support a few other sharing options, NFS and WebDAV, but for now, like I said, we'll just do Windows sharing for most people running a home system, or if you're integrating a type of Active Directory, this is generally how you're going to do it. So you go over to storage, and let's create a share. Now this used to be a 2-step process, some of the older version of FreeNAS. It's a 1-step process. When you create the share, and we're going to create a new SMB share, it at the same time creates a data set for it. And data set versus directory versus zval. So a data set is a subset of a volume that allows you to do replication and snapshot on it in its own container, so to speak, versus just sharing out a directory. If we want to use some of the real advanced features of ZFS, specifically snapshots, this is one of the ways we want to do it. So we'll call this Thomas share. Description, Tom's share. Now permissions, by default it's going to go to root. We're going to select the other user. All your users will just show up here. You can do a user search. Select. If you want to control advanced options and change a lot of things, like for example, allow guests or hidden files, we're not really worried about that. We're just going to go through the basics here. Hit save. Once again, we see in our task it's going, and the share is created. And if we go over here, I'm in Linux, so we go SMB 192.168.3.24. It prompted me for my username and password, and shows me to share. Go in here, and we can copy and paste files in here or whatever. Just paste a movie in real quick just to show that it works. Copying not super fast, but it's also, running in a virtual machine, so I'm not getting probably the full speed I could be getting on this. But while that's copying, you'd look at the dashboard, and you'll probably see small spikes in the network traffic. CPU usage, actually, do we add, let's edit the dashboard. We can add disk I/O to this. And we see there's some rewrite going on a disk. And the file's copied over here. So it's pretty straightforward for creating a share on that. Then we can show you how the snapshots work. Now, you can snapshot an entire volume, which would be this, or we can snapshot an individual data set. So, I'm sorry, I clicked on shares. So we can snapshot the entire volume or a data set. Now, what this allows me to do, if we create a snapshot, and we'll just call this test snap. It expires after 1 week. We'll go ahead and say never. You can worry if you want it expiring on a certain day. What those do is snapshots are very much like people are used to in Windows, is a snapshot of the system, kind of like a system state. So we're going to hit save. And now we've created a snapshot as the system was creation on there. So if I add files, delete files, anything I do that share, if I revert back to it. Now, the revert here does not revert back to the snapshot. This is something else they have not implemented in here yet, and it's kind of annoying. The only way I know of, as of right now, March of 2017, since the release of this with the current version, you can't roll back a snapshot from the GUI. You have to do it from the command line. Not only from the command line, specifically from the shell, because there's both the command line and the shell. Now, that being said, I did test it. It does work fine. You have to just force it, and you can list them with the ZFS tools. But kind of what's the point in having a GUI if you can't roll it back? But this is one of those things that did kind of annoy me that it's not there because it's there in the other one. But the good news is you can set up very easily here in the GUI the snapshots themselves. So great that we can do it. Unfortunately, it's not as easy to roll them back. So let's look at the data sets again here. And everything kind of tears out like this. I like the way you can do a drill down for each one of them, create something. Now this is also why we created the data set with that snapshot. See how this is the main drive and this is /Tom share has its own snapshot. Because if we wanted, let's say you had a series of shares, you wanted to restore something and you'd only snapshotted the main system, it would roll everything back to the previous snapshot versus rolling back just one piece of one data set. So if you have a share called QuickBooks, another share called other company files, and maybe you go, oh man, something happened, I need to roll this snapshot back, you'd want to roll only that folder back, that share back, versus rolling everything back. There are some ways you can look inside of it that I won't get into. Like there is some granular ways to do restores and snapshots, but it's not super easy. Generally speaking, you just want to roll back to a snapshotted point. And you can also, using the calendar function, which we'll jump over to, allow you to automate that. So if we wanted to automate a snapshot, and let's say every day at this time, and snap, make a snap, and then we browse for the data set. Now it starts at the first part of it, and you're like, well, where's the other ones? You have to double click, and we're going to then select it so it automates Tom share. Select, enabled, how long you want them to go, prefix snap, allow replication every day. You can do custom every week, every month, choose days like this, and we're going to hit save. And this creates a calendar task for that. And then you can see which days of the week. We chose not to run them on Fridays, and it shows the other statuses that we have in here. Now, side note, I will admit this, the first time I had done this, it kept telling me there's no event manager available. I kept getting an error, and I rebooted and it's working fine. I haven't had it happen again, so not really sure, just wanted to throw it out there. But this is a pretty new release. We know there's going to be some issues in here. All right, networking. Networking's pretty straightforward on this. It's, other than being laid out different, it's the same as in previous versions of FreeNAS. Much prettier though. I just set it to DHCP, but you can statically assign by putting in the IP addresses here and unchecking the DHCP part of this, and then it'll let you put in your own, add an address, fill it in. It'll do IPv4, v6. It's based on FreeBSD, which is fully IPv6 compatible stack. So you can set all that up in here. I have not tested with this version doing bonding. I don't really have it set up to do that or have the right tools right now to go through that, but for purposes of getting set up, you can install one network card pretty easily. Then you have all your standard overview for systems. Gives you all the things. Like I said, just rebooted it 7 minutes ago. Preferences, where you can save the config, restore factory defaults. If you restore factory defaults in here, it will reset your root password. It will also not let you easily do it from the command line, and not the most obvious way. You have to go through, and they now have it in the wiki, which it looks like it was recently added, how to set the password for root, because it's not as easy. Well, it's not as intuitive. I'm not going to say it's really easy to do once you know the command, but you do have to set it from the command line if you do this. I don't know what it sets it to. Basically, you can't log in until you set it. You can look at the updates. This is the FreeNAS Corral release. It looks like there's probably some pending package updates. You can then switch, just like before, to a different version. I don't know if it will roll back to the FreeNAS 10, 9.10, but it does offer that option on there. And as we had the services, we already started the SMB in here. Pretty straightforward to start those. All the options are very similar to they were in the other versions. I haven't done any NFS shares to make sure they work, but for the most part, it looks pretty much the same here. Now, this is awesome. This is the console system. Now, this allows you to do some of the management right from here for users, for volume management, and you just type help. So let's go to volumes. Now, once you're into volume, now you could string out the whole command volume, then the volume name, and whatnot, but it's nice. But once you go into one of the subset commands, then we can do help for just this, and we're dealing with these commands. Now, this is not the shell. This is specifically the console management tool for FreeNAS 10. It's a great improvement. This still has a few more features than the GUI does, the web interface, but they're working to build parity between them. But once you get used to using this, it's actually really nice, because being able to do things from the command line, once you're, if you're a Linux guy like me, it's really convenient because you get used to doing certain commands. So we will go into the 5-drive RAID, which you can then show the options for that. Now you're showing the status of that. If we type in help, we can do things like show dis, shows you each one online. This is also where you can detach, delete, change data sets, move offline, and snapshot. It also has some options to upgrade the volume, to force a scrub or replace a disk in a pool. Now this does allow replacement in here, and you would, when the disk you're replacing dev, it doesn't autocomplete, unfortunately, but you would put in the disk you're replacing and the disk you want to replace it with, so you can do it from here. Pretty slick. Not real hard to do to replace the volume, and it automatically starts resilvering the drives. Now you can jump to the shell anytime. So we're just going to hit shell, and we're going to go ZFS list, and spell list right, -t snapshots. Actually, shot, not S on the end. And you will actually be able to list the snapshots, and then you could do a ZFS. I believe the command is, ZFS rollback, and then the name of the snapshot, and you'd be able to roll it back to that snapshot. That's the only way to roll back the snapshots at the moment. I mean, it does work, so it's still ZFS. It's just not available in the actual web interface at all, or even in the CLI interface here. So as you can see, we can create a snap, but we can't actually roll one back. So you click show, and it'll show snapshots, but as you see, if we go to help, we can create, we can show, but there is no rollback from here, only from the command line. Anytime you're in the CLI, top brings you back to the top. Clear clears. And help, wherever you're at, it's going to bring up a whole list of help here. Now, I've had some weird issues where it got stuck. Just simply logging out, logging back in. Not rebooting, just log out, log in, and it seems to fix it when it gets stuck. I don't know, it'll just get stuck on a command, like it doesn't want to let me type anymore. I'm not really sure why. Now, peering is kind of neat. They've made this pretty simple. So I have another FreeNAS box set up that I was testing with. And what this is supposed to do is first it's going to give you a health check of it. Let's make see the peer entry works. All right, stayed online, round trip ping, health check every 1 minute. Now what this lets you do, and I have not done a lot of testing with this, but FreeNAS 10 has made it a lot easier to do things like replication between FreeNAS devices. And you actually can go here, replications, and there's our peer, FreeNAS local. Source dataset, target dataset, compression. What this will let you do is actually replicate an entire volume using ZFS replication across the network to the other device. Now, this is particularly great because now you're not just having a mirrored set of drives. If you build a second RAID box, maybe without as many redundant drives, just for replication purposes and storage, so you have two physically different boxes. Of course, pipe this over the internet. Now you have fully replicated your FreeNAS instance in two places as far as all the different drives and data on here. Really cool. I like the way they made this a lot easier. I'm going to do some testing with this. That's another video. But the fact that it seems to be this easy to set up really impresses me. Now, we're running in a virtual machine, so I can't show you the cool VM stuff, but don't worry, I am going to show you the cool VM stuff because I built a regular machine just for that. So this is kind of the overview of how to get you started and get going with this. Then we're going to do a deep dive next into the VMs, which is really what's the big fascination with the new FreeNAS 10. So this is my physical machine running FreeNAS 10, and it's still another test machine because, as I said, I haven't moved this over to production because of, well, I don't know if I'm ready for it yet, not for a system to rely on. So this is the machine we paired with. So here's what it shows up on the other side. It sees the other device, and it pairs on both sides. So this is the FreeNAS 2, the other one is the FreeNAS 1. Now, we have loaded some Docker images, and these are cool. So I'm using the Cinnamon one, and let's walk you through real quick how this works. So we did two things here. First is the Docker containers, and then the Docker host I had to create. But we're going to start at VMs and show you why that's there. So when you want to create one, we hit the plus, we pick the name, we pick the template, syn test 2, because I already have this template downloaded. So we're going to choose Cinnamon, Linux Mint Cinnamon 18, syn test 2, data store. Now it automatically knows that this volume, which was set up in storage, this one in particular is called terabyte because it's a terabyte hard drive, and it's my favorite typo is calling it a terabyte, which if you Google it, you'll find websites that list that on there. This is our syn. Apparently spelled cinnamon wrong. There we go. 2 N's in cinnamon. Cinnamon test. How many cores? How many memory? Let's see. We're going to give it 2 cores, but only 1 gig of RAM. You can tell this to be an auto-starting VM. Now, we're going to click Save. And away we go, creating Cinnamon Test 2. It's only going to take a few minutes. Well, not even, because the template's already on here. So that quickly, we are able to create another one. Now, the reason why, and we should just jump over to storage real quick here. We go to the data sets on here. You'll see that there's a VM cache file that was created of the Cinnamon install. It did that the very first time I did it. Therefore, any installs or duplications, it's going to pull from the cache file. Now, the first time I did it took a while to download. It's was a few 4.6 gig. Took a little while to download, not that long. I got a fast connection, but that's how the VMs work. Once you've downloaded them once, it creates a cached copy of it here. Now, starting the VM, this is what's really cool. So we can see the devices, and one device is a frame buffer. Specifically, it's a VNC frame buffer. It also has this option here for your net card, whether or not it's in bridge mode, the operating system, the OS, the block device. Now this is where it gets a little confusing. Once this device has been created, it automatically creates, let's jump back over here to storage, dataset. There is the block device for that. So when those block devices, or here's the SynTest 2 one actually, I was clicking on the Minty Fresh one, but the same thing. There is the block device for it. You can snapshot this, you can duplicate this, you can replicate this. This is actually really nice because you can create snapshots of this and then roll it back. So you can create the snapshot of your VM while it's off or even while it's on. And I'm not sure what happens when it's on. It may have some problems, but it may sort them out. I haven't really done that. But while the VM's off, you can create a snapshot, run some tests on it. Granted, you have to drop back to the command line, but then you can just roll it back. Please note, revert is for only reverting changes related to the changes you make in the settings here. So let's go back over to the VM. And we'll look at our SYN test 2 that we just did. And we're going to go ahead and boot it. And it boots up relatively fast. And we're going to pop open the VGA console. Now we can VNC in, just like you've seen, which is nice. But we can also do this. Yes, it has VNC wrapped right into here. Or I'm not sure what it's using. I'm assuming it's using some form of VNC. I didn't really look at the documentation behind the scenes. But the whole GUI works inside of here, which is fascinating. Now you got a couple different options. It's still booting, so we'll look at this. You can go to a serial console or a VGA console. Now we went to a VGA console and it is a little laggy. One, this computer's not real fast. It does let me know it's running completely in software mode, so it can't render with hardware. So there's a little bit of interface lag. Ideally, you're not going to run a lot of GUI stuff on here, but it's kind of cool that you can. Please note, when doing the GUI, the boot style, even though this is Linux, is UEFI versus grub. The only way it can do the frame buffering is with the UEFI. You can do this. So you can install this on UEFI onto a drive, and it works. And we're going to go ahead and we'll power this one back off. Shut down. And we'll see it running in a second here. It'll go from green to turning off. It turns off relatively fast. Now, if you just looked at serial console, you can get just terminal. And for example, here, because we standard up with grub, we did just standard serial console. Now, if these are both built using the templates and also just as easy to destroy. So we're going to go ahead and destroy this cinnamon test here. And we see the task kicking off. That one's destroyed, and we'll destroy this one too. Now, the cache is still there. We can delete it if we wanted to save some space, but it also got rid of the other storage units that were here. So the other data sets for those go away with it, which is convenient. So you obviously you wanted to delete them. They delete, they come out. And if we want to create them again, it can pull from the cache and redeploy it. And I've seen some questions related to this is how do I create a Linux install without it? Well, it's pretty straightforward. You can do test Linux, no template, choose the data store, choose the boot device, testing Linux, 512 auto start. Now we have to add some devices to it. We're going to add a new disk. This was really confusing to me, but a little less confusing now. So disk 1, we'll give it a 30 gigabyte disk. You don't need to choose the target path, and that was part of what was confusing to me. So we're not going to choose it, and we're just going to hit save and save. And I'll show you what it did here on the devices. It automatically figures out the target path. I found out if you put a target path, it kept creating problems for me. A lot of problems, and it just didn't like it. It would give me weird errors. I don't really know why. You should be able to, but it doesn't work that well. Also, you can choose a disk or a file as the target path. There is some advanced uses for that. For example, importing, maybe you want to choose a special block device or a special file as a block device. I had some trouble making some of that work. It seems to be that you have to drop to command line to really get that work right, so not a big deal. Now, please note too, once you've created it, it says 0 bytes. If you try to change that, you'll get stuck in a loop of errors. I found out sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but it doesn't actually change the device. You'll get unable to shrink volume, and then the VM won't start, and it will just get you stuck. Even if you try and make the volume bigger, I was able to make that error happen a couple times. Pretty much, I think, just don't touch it. Where you see this storage unit is go here, go to data set, there's the storage unit, and you understand how much is being used. So once you create the drive, create it to the size you want. I believe there's a command line way in the Beehive system to make it grow. Not that advanced in that yet right now. This just kind of gets you started. Now, obviously, you need a boot device here. like the network. So new NIC device. You can choose NAT, has its own network, or I'm going to choose bridge because I want it part of my network. Default interface, you can bind it to a specific interface. I just leave it at whatever the default is. Please note, as I'm adding these devices, if you don't click the save over here, they're not really added. Oh, already found a problem. Yeah, this is the problem I'm running into. Once you go into that disk one, you'll get this can't shrink zval, hit revert, save. Now we go to the devices. And as you notice, I didn't even shrink it. It just does that. So don't go into the disk and touch any settings at all in that disk. You can look at it, but don't touch it, or you'll have to hit revert and then save, and then you can add it. Because you notice how the devices I added, well, they went away. So new NIC device. We'll call this net1. You can specify a MAC address. If you don't, it will make one up for you. New CD-ROM device. Now this is kind of cool because you can browse if you have a ISO of a Ubuntu or anything like that. You can browse and point it there. I don't have one on this system. I don't think. Maybe. Oh, cool. I actually have FreeNAS in here. That's recursive, but might be fun. We can install FreeNAS inside of a virtual FreeNAS. We'll hit save. Then we'll choose that as the boot device. It's FreeBSD 64. I said testing Linux, but we have the FreeNAS boot device in there. Make sure it's all saved. Start. And there we are. The serial console will work, and we can install FreeNAS inside of FreeNAS. I don't know if that'll work or not. I think it'll work once. I don't think you can install it again recursively because the virtualization doesn't support further virtualization, I don't think. But that gives you an idea how to get these working. Now, I have tried booting up Windows inside of here. No luck. I've copied the files over. I've followed a couple things. I've seen people get it working. It might just be the crappy hardware because this is an old machine I'm using for testing. But I have not got Linux work. I've got Linux working in there fine with different tests. I haven't tried. Let's look at the serial console, see if this is actually booting. This computer's not super fast, so it may be booting. It's just booting really slow. But I don't know if you can really run FreeBSD or FreeNAS inside of FreeNAS without some type of issues. So I'm going to go ahead and shut this down. But that's how you would do it and load, whichever version of Linux. And as you've seen, the Linux Mint only took a few minutes, boots right up. There's a few other versions in here that you can do as of right now. A few different templates. So we got Arch, boot to Docker, Smart OS, pfSense. You can build a virtual firewall inside your FreeNAS, which I thought was really cool. And choose a couple network cards, and away you go. Now, Docker runs as a virtual machine, but Docker, of course, as we know, if you can Google this if you're not aware, this supports two different things. So VMs are part of a hypervisor, which is part of a virtual machine, which emulates hardware. What Docker does, it's a container management system, and the container management system works a lot different than your hypervisor-based systems because they can share certain libraries. They're very efficient, versus this is each one has its own data store. Each one has its own subsystem running under the hypervisor. So I won't get in a whole discussion about that. It's a whole nother video. Google like a hypervisor versus container. There's a lot of people that did some really good write-ups and explaining the differences on there. But when you're creating Docker, the first thing you need to do before you can set up a container is create a Docker host. And the host runs as a virtual machine inside of here. Then each container runs inside of that particular host, or you can have multiple Docker hosts and group them together. Now the containers, FreeNAS, now there's a lot of them these are basically pre-filled in systems, different things you can do, this is a lump stack with Nginx, MineOS, lots of different stuff in here. You can spin up a MySQL. Open project looks kind of cool. Own cloud is in here. I believe Nextcloud is in here too. Let's see if it is. Yep, Nextcloud. So these are different instances you can spin up. Let's just do Plex. I know it's a popular one. I'm not going to go through all of configuring it. That would be another video. We're going to go ahead and use these here, and then this here. We're going to set all the paths to be. I'm not going to bother creating. We'll just pretend we created something else. I'll set them all to be my share. Whoops. Tom share, select. And then these are the variables we're going to go ahead and use. Bridged, DHCP, make sure you check that. And you have to name the container or you'll get an error message. Says these errors here, could figure I was doing wrong, I forgot to name the container. So this is our Plex server. Everything looks good, everything's checked, everything has data in it that is checked. That's an important little thing there, except for the Mac, will generate that automatically. Then we hit save. If I did it right, here we go. That quick, it creates a Plex. Now it's got it cached because I've done this before as part of my testing before I was here. But you can see how quickly it'll load up again. So if you need to create more instances of Plex, you can create more than one. So you have your start, stop, restart, and the web UI. And it worked. So there's Plex ready to be signed in and start configuring. So pretty straightforward of how that works. And then it's then running, this particular VM is running this container. So here's your Docker host. And it doesn't tell you what's on it there, but then when you look at Plex server, it tells you it's on Docker host, which is the one I named here. Now you can create, as I said, multiple Docker hosts. By default, it chooses this one. If you had more than one, you could hit a pull down and choose the different Docker hosts you wanted on there. So you can create, more individualism. So really straightforward the way these containers work. I like it. It seems pretty neat. Not too much configuring on there. You have to make sure the permissions are right and things like that. So I have to look at what permissions are being created in that share and make sure that this has right permissions for it. But it's pretty cool. It also, for any one of these, because it's technically a Linux machine, you can look at what's running inside of this particular instance of it and just go right into a serial console. Now, there's not any actually passwords because Docker's handling the user authentication on the front side. So as long as the Docker host is working, you can console into each individual Docker container. A whole nother topic of getting into the Docker containers. It's a great and amazing tool. It's kind of maybe daunting at first to learn, but once you learn it, it's pretty slick. So this was your kind of get started with the FreeNAS box, and to let you know some of the things like you can't replace a bad drive from the GUI, and the other thing is replacing encrypted drives seems way overly complicated, which really disappoints me because I encrypt all my drives, so it kind of has me waiting on here. An introduction to the console. Questions and comments. I'll be doing more videos. I'll probably do another video on just how to replace an individual drive on this, but I just wanted to get started on it. I longtime lover of FreeNAS. I love that they have all this integrated in here. I may play around and figure out why I can't get Windows working. Like I said, it could be because I'm running an older crappy machine we had laying around here just for testing, but it runs Linux great and the templates work awesome. And other than the don't accidentally click on the drive is real important. Don't do when you're doing this, don't click on the drives when you're doing the virtual machines, because you're going to have a bad time with them. So don't do that. Other than that, everything else is great about it. It seems pretty stable. I've been running it a couple days since the release, and really overall the actual hardware machine has had no problems. I've had a couple problems with the VirtualBox instance of it doing the testing, but maybe it's just because I was playing with and deleting all the things instead of actually just using it. I was just deleting drives, rebooting it, restarting drives. But if you like the content here, like and subscribe. If you like FreeNAS videos, message me and I'll keep making more of them. I'm going to keep playing FreeNAS. I'm not quite ready until that encryption thing is sorted out in my head better. Maybe either better understanding for me how to do it from the command line or updated interface. I'm not going to run it as my production system, but I will do some more videos on it because I'm going to move to this as a production system as the product matures. But hats off to them. I mean, this was a huge rewrite of the FreeNAS system. Great work on the team. I mean, these guys did a great job of it, and it's good to see all the more stuff that's coming. All right. Once again, thanks for watching. Appreciate it.